Hey, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.
Good morning.
Good
Let's,
morning.
Good morning.
all right.
Not too enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Michelle?
I'm tired. I don't know about y'all, but I'm tired.
It's been a while
Tired.
since we've all been here together, and maybe some of you are watching this show for the first time. So let me go around and introduce everybody. First of all, here's my friend Michelle. Michelle, uh, I hope you watched the show we did yesterday and have a few opinions to share with us.
Oh, yeah.
All right, that's great. And for those of you who don't know, Michelle is our lone professional on the panel, and she's very, very intelligent. And
Well,
I
thank you.
try to take her advice as much as I can, and I think you should too. Moving
Well,
right
thank
along, yeah.
you.
Moving right along, we've got Revis, Jr. Jr. Say something to the people.
Hello, people. How are you doing?
All righty, and Barry. Barry, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good this morning. I'm always good, though. As long as I wake up, I'm good.
All righty.
That's real.
So, Michelle, we had a show without you yesterday, and we
Yes.
went around the map a little bit. I'm sure you've got a little bit of input for the audience. What do you have to say about the show we did yesterday?
Well, first things first, I appreciate the whole sentiment of all lives matter. The thing is that when we're saying Black Lives Matter, we're not saying that all lives don't matter. What we're saying is that these issues in particular need to be addressed. So it's kind of like all lives matter is like the big umbrella, and then we have the little things underneath. Why am I getting feedback?
I don't know.
So, when we're looking at Black Lives Matter, this like whole police brutality is just one little part of the whole thing. So we're looking at, and I did Healthy Start in the past, and one of the things that I know, hands down, is that maternal rates of death, of complications are much higher in the Black community. And that has to do with inadequacies and, discrimination, racism, and systemic racism that occurs even in the healthcare field. And they did like a whole thing about Black people, when they have complications from diabetes, are more likely to lose limbs than white people that have complications from diabetes. So even that in itself is a difference in the way that our whole system is set up. So that was one of the things. Yes, every single life matters, but at the same time, we're addressing the concerns of this one community.
Right.
There's other communities that are going to need to be addressed too. But, Rome was not built in a day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any feedback on that?
Well, I mean, do you think
Almost not
that
looking to be- Go ahead,
the
Rob.
problems in the medical field stem from just inherent lack of compassion for other races? Is it because the medical field is mostly white? So
There's that. And even in terms of pain medicine, white people are more likely to get pain medicine when they complain about pain. Black people are less likely to get pain medicine after surgeries than white people, because there's this belief that Black people do not feel pain like white people. Like, even in that respect, there is implicit, and it's not like people are sitting there going, Black people don't feel pain like white people. This is just part of the system from the get-go. So this isn't where you're thinking that, or Rebus is thinking that, or Barry is thinking that. It is the system itself and the way that it's set up and all the baggage that we carry all the way back from when we were enslaving people. Because in order to enslave people, you had to make them less, right? Otherwise, how do you justify enslaving people?
Right.
If they're equal to you, you can't enslave people. You have to dehumanize. And how do you dehumanize? One of them is reducing pain. So that way you can justify beating and working to death and being able to rip families apart. And this has not changed. Remember, integration only really happened, 40, 60 years ago? And in the 70s is really when it got ramped up, because the 60s is when we had Brown versus the Board of Education, and they said separate and equal is not equal. Right. And it was really in the 70s that it was forced. They started forcing it in the 60s. But I sent you that link yesterday about Robert E. Lee High School in Texas that was formed specifically during that desegregation time, so that way they could funnel the white kids to that school. And it's Robert E. Lee School.
Yeah.
Wow. Good old Confederate guy.
Yeah. So this stuff has been going on. And I've said it before, I'm a trauma therapist. It's what I do. And one of the things that we know is there's something called epigenetics. And trauma can continue down the line genetically, because trauma and stresses can actually turn on and off genes. And it could change the way that genes are expressed. And so even that is handed down through the DNA. So to say that this happened hundreds of years ago, when the stresses from this continue, it's something that and I get where people are coming from when they're saying that, because we have this mentality in America, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But really, we have also intergenerational wealth, where when people were freed, they were just basically kind of like when you get out of prison, right? They just dump you on the street and say, here's your $50, good luck. And then you have like
bootstraps, but first you got to have a pair of boots.
You got to have a pair of boots. Sometimes they give you a pair of boots, but they got holes in them. You pull them up, they fall apart. And they're like, we gave you a pair of boots.
What's your problem?
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Okay, so let's just say, for the sake of discussion here, that we're talking about generational curse, generational.
It's not a curse.
No, okay. But I'm just saying, for the sake of discussion, we just say, a cycle, whatever. How do you break this generational cycle? Because let's just say, for example, let's look at it from wealth point of view. The only color per se is, the old days used to say green because of the color of money, but now it's plastic. But regardless, wealth building. Yep. With wealth building comes choices where most people don't have choices. Let's say, for example, you're saying that it's a systemic problem, and whether you have insurance or you have to depend on the government to subsidize your health care, food, or whatever. So if there is no wealth involved, then how do you break this cycle of people feeling that they have no wealth and their voice cannot be heard? Because at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of Black rich people out there detaching themselves from this movement out there, that Black Lives Matter, because they're saying that they were able to come up with wealth and do all the things, and they have all the benefits of America, and that's not them. So how would that work?
Because even with Ben Carson, he likes to say he was, a self-made man. But even if you look at his history, his mom really encouraged him. But in terms of generational wealth, there's where reparations, and that's a dirty word with a lot of people.
Oh, it's a beautiful word to me.
And because, we gave reparations to the Japanese Americans that we rounded up during World War II and took their businesses and destroyed their lives. They got reparations.
Let's not bring up the 40 acres and a mule.
Nobody got their 40 acres and a mule, because then we had Southern Reconstruction. Then we had Jim Crow laws. We had because Black people, when they first got out, if I remember correctly, when they first got out of slavery, they had the right to vote, but then they started putting poll taxes, which is basically what they're doing with convicted felons in the state of Florida. But whatever. So you had poll tax, you had literacy tests, you had all these things, knowing full well Black people were not taught to read and write on those plantations.
I saw one where they had to.
I had to answer. That was Mom's medical people.
Gotcha. Yeah. What were you saying, Barry?
Yeah, they had one where they had to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar to vote.
Just ridiculous stuff.
But all the white people already knew how many was in the jar. So when the Blacks
okay. What about if we look at any successful models? How about Nelson Mandela's truth councils?
Which one is that one? Where he did a great job, but then you still have people that are mad at South Africa and how they handled their race issues.
And if you look at it though, that still didn't come through without a lot of bloodshed and a lot of strife. You know, it wasn't like he was able to just jump straight into getting peace. It took a lot of bloodshed in South Africa before they.
Personally, he spent what, 27 years in prison?
Yeah. Yep.
But I was speaking specifically to after he took power and they had these councils about telling the truth and moving on. Because Nelson Mandela came to a point.
We refused to do that here.
Yeah, but he said we can't erase the past. We can only confront, deal with it, and move on. Mm-hmm. And he was criticized for the fact that a lot of the people that committed all these atrocities were not prosecuted. All he said, if you come forward and tell the truth and name places and where the bodies are at, we will not prosecute you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was trading that for closure, trying to get the remains of the people.
And once again, I'm a trauma therapist. And so even with that, when we're talking about healing from trauma, talking about it and processing is what heals it. And in America, what we have chosen to do is not deal with it, where we just keep shoving it down and saying, this isn't a problem, this isn't a problem. Yeah, and so then it comes out, just like in people, it comes out in these very chaotic, directions everywhere where there isn't a focus because it's just, we're not dealing with it. It's not being dealt with. I don't know. That's my soapbox.
Yeah. Okay, but what about if we mix two things that many people try to do? What about the Black and Brown movement?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, right now, what I find, so basically here are my thoughts based on the research and all this other stuff. When you lift one group up, you automatically start lifting other groups up because it's all bound up together. So anybody that wants to see their circumstances improve should encourage other people's circumstances to improve. That's how we move forward as a society.
And the reason why I was asking, I heard your interview with the other social worker, and she mentioned the Black and Brown, which I'm not opposed to it. I just have differences of opinion on that because I'm considered brown. And my views and goals are not the same because it's just a political difference. Whereas most brown, you will see a religious Catholic upbringing and more conservative approach, religious-wise. And on the other side, you have a more liberal and not necessarily also religious, but not as conservative as a Catholic church. So right there, those two things are different. So our outcomes are going to be different. Our movements are going to be different.
I got the feeling Rebus is about to start bashing the liberals again.
Yeah, but you still face the same problems when it comes to racism and things of that matter there. So in the essence, it is the same. It's all about changing the mentality of how people see each other. And they see the brown movement is the same as the black movement.
But not necessarily. Let's just take two cities pretty easy. Miami and Los Angeles.
Miami is Cuban. And there's an issue with the Hispanic community with the belief that Cubans think they're better than everybody else. That Cubans identify more with the white culture than the Hispanic culture. So that is an issue in itself. That's why you see them be so conservative down there. And they have this sense, because they came here legally through that whole boat lift and all that other stuff, wet foot, dry foot, their struggle to get here is legitimate. While people from Mexico, Guatemala, South America, their struggle is illegitimate because they didn't come here legally.
Right, but all you have to do...
The policies were different.
Yes. Right, but look at Miami and look at Los Angeles. Just look at all the people in power. Look at their surnames.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you look at the population though.
Right, but the point that I'm making is they hold that up as a saying is they have the power. They have arrived. They have made inways into the political, religious, and all factions of American life. So they don't feel oppressed. They feel like they're on top. Yes. And And by definition, they're telling all other non-American whites that, hey, if we've accomplished this, you can also accomplish this.
Yeah, and that sounds good until you move them to Alabama or Kentucky or Nebraska somewhere. You know, it sounds good when you got the numbers. You're always looking good. But once you were placed in a spot where you at a disadvantage or where you at a vast minority, then the struggle becomes real.
Right. And see, also, when you're talking about these two places, LA and Miami, remember that there is a huge transient portion of the population when we're not talking about COVID-19, of course. So
yeah,
with that influx of people, there's also an influx of cultures where if you take the same situation like Barry's talking about to Alabama, there is no influx of culture in Alabama. There is no melting pot in Alabama. You know, that's white bread, white fed, and that's all there is to it. Everything else is going to either get in line or get trampled over. And it's like that in a lot of middle America. You know, there's no diffusion of culture. It's all one way.
Yep. You know? And then they've also, the people that are of brown complexion in those areas, they have been doing a lot of those immigration roundups where they're going into the, you know, because there's a big, a lot of the migrants work in that horse again. But there's like they tend to work in poultry and meat processing plants. So I think it was like Tyson Foods or something like that they've been going in and rounding up. Yeah. And even that in itself, they're taking all these people. And then what's interesting, not really interesting, but really just fucked up, is you have these children that are then left at home by themselves. Okay. That are then picked up by the foster care system.
All right. Now, see, I knew we were going to get to these kids before long. And look,
damn kids.
First thing I got to say with these guys, these parents that bring their children to America illegally, and if you know that when you get caught at the border, your family is going to get separated, why bring your kids? I mean,
that speaks to how bad their original country is.
You're chopping up. Michelle, you're chopping up. You're chopping up. You're becoming
I gotta wait for my internet to be stable.
Oh, okay.
Is it stable now?
Yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
I live in the country.
Oh, all right. Well, call Opie and Andy.
So, but
call
just
Opie and Andy and see if they'll come fix your Wi-Fi.
Don't let me get started on the infrastructure and privatization of infrastructure.
Are you on the Green Acres Internet Network up there?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I was saying, for me, it's like this. Why bring your kids to a crime? You wouldn't bring your kids to a bank robbery.
You wouldn't, but if your country where you're going to, because they're escaping from gang violence, and don't get me started about why that occurred in those countries.
I understand that.
So you're sitting there saying the risk of coming to America is smaller than the risk of staying in your country.
Right.
That's pretty fucked up.
Yes, I get that. It's just that it bothers me that they're bringing their children and then screaming, I don't want to be separated from my children. But I mean, you know, that's the risk you take. That's the risk you take.
Refugee status is supposed to be where that doesn't occur.
Right.
So this whole thing where they're separating families is against international law. I think I sent everybody that link, or maybe I just sent it to you.
Yeah, I got it.
About what the treaties are that the U.S. signed on in terms of refugee status. So these are refugees where they are required to come to the country where they're asking refugee status. They have to ask for refugee status in the country. Right. They can't apply for it in Guatemala or Honduras. FYI.
I get it.
Yeah. So they're not coming here just for economic relief, although that is one of the reasons why people can be refugees.
Yes. And speaking of relief, I find it very relieving that they finally charged everybody in George Floyd's tragedy.
Yeah.
I think that's a great thing. And now, understandably, there's going to be a higher burden proving second-degree murder over third. However, they can still list lesser and included offenses. Just because he gets charged with second-degree murder doesn't mean he has to get found guilty only of second-degree murder.
Yeah, but at least put it on the table. And that's all I want.
There's a lot of legal strategy involved in that. And now they're charging the other guys as well because, look, they're all first responders anyway. So somebody was supposed to, if you're not going to knock this bastard off his back, off George Floyd's back and tell him to stop, you can at least do CPR or something.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to interject something right quick. Did y'all know that the ambulance that came to to the scene, those were not EMTs, those were cops.
Right.
No, I did not know that.
Okay,
that's even
go
more
back and look at the video. Go back and look at the video, and you will see all they did was get into an ambulance. When they get out, they have on their bulletproof vests and uniform. They're not.
That's crazy.
That's some MIB stuff right there.
I didn't believe so myself until I watched the video. I mean, how many EMTs do you know wear bulletproof vests and have cop uniforms on?
None.
All right.
Even the EMT. So I know an EMT, she's up in New York, and she would go into some of the most crime-ridden neighborhoods. And they didn't wear bulletproof vests. They brought the police with them when they needed to.
Right.
Because sometimes they would still shoot at the EMT people. But that's the roughest neighborhoods. This isn't.
That shooting at the EMTs came from back in the early 80s. The cops used to masquerade as EMTs to get to the holes, the dope holes up there in the crime spots, and then pull out and arrest people. So after that, when they saw firemen and EMTs, they thought that was the law coming, and they just busted on them.
Yep. Oh, yeah. That person understands that baggage that comes along with it. Yeah. From what she was saying, she wasn't mad about it. She understood it.
Yeah.
And so what other things are on our agenda here?
Yeah, so I don't feel like we really addressed the first one about how do we change these systemic views that people have, and you said how to break the cycle. And really, it's mostly with education.
Well, how about having dialogue? And I think most people don't want to come to the table.
No. They get into their feelings too quick. Instead of just sitting back and listening, they become extremely defensive. And they don't want to hear it because they don't, people don't want to acknowledge that it can be assholes. That's like a hard pill to swallow. And by sitting down and having dialogues where people say, this is the way that I feel, this is what's been going on, and people take that personally instead of just being able to hear it, that kind of shuts down the conversation, especially when the people that don't want to hear it have the power. My internet is unstable again. Yes. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
You're back.
All right.
Well, that's the only thing I could see that really would work would be some kind of dialogue. And like I said, but so many people don't want a seat at the table. They want the whole table. They want to be in control. So nothing's going to change there. In absence of any reasonable dialogue, the only other thing left is violence and protest.
No, you have to. Well, that doesn't really get you anywhere. Nowhere. It just means that one person assert their power over the other one, and then they still hate each other. And the first shot they get, they'll protest and violence back. What you really need to do is educate the youth. You got to get to the youth first, and that's why integration is so important. Because once they start interacting with each other, then they realize that, hey, outside of the color of our skin, we're not different. We have the same problems, same issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think the only way that I guess the best example I could give of that would be sports organizations and any kind of unions, but sports and work. Think about that. Inherently, they're always going to disagree because they're on opposite sides. But at some point, they have to sit down and have dialogue and work something out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I see sports as exploitive at times.
Okay, but still, at the end of the day, okay, for example,
More
the
medical
last
stuff.
Players go together.
no, but let's take for example, at one time, the NFL had a dispute and they stopped playing, or they were going to stop playing football. And when it came down to it, they were arguing how to divide a $10 billion pie. So they came to the conclusion, well, okay, if one side says, I'm not giving, the other side is not going to give in, then they're just going to lose the $10 billion pie. And reasonable heads prevailed. They said, well, we're going to split this somehow. So it's the same thing. If we have to coexist, if we say we're all Americans, we all believe in the United States Constitution and the pursuit of this happiness, however we define it, as fellow Americans, we have to have dialogue.
Mm-hmm. I'm very fortunate. I got to grow up in a very mixed town. My town was 33, like 30% or 33% white, 33% black, and 33% Hispanic. And then you had that little 1% that was like the others.
You guys didn't have any Chinese food restaurants?
We did. That was the 1%.
Oh, okay, just checking.
We had that, very small minority. We did have like some people from Arab descent, some people from Asian descent, but I was very fortunate. And even in our elementary schools, different areas of the town were bussed together. So we had a housing project in my town. So those kids were split into the different schools. So I was very, very fortunate to be exposed. And that was a big difference. Like Barry said, is that integration made a big difference. Even my next door neighbor, she was black. The one lady on the other side was a racist white lady, though. But the other person on the other side, they were from the Caribbean. The people across the street were Brazilian. I was very, very fortunate. And that changed my worldview. And even my mother is a first generation. She's from Germany. So even with that, I was like sometimes the weird kid because I'd have the German food, but whatever.
Okay, what about this? United versus uniform.
Yeah, no uniform.
I think that's that's another big thing. I believe that one of the agendas being pushed is, especially by the left, and I'll leave it at that, no political affiliation.
Here we go again, everybody.
No, just the left it's no different from prison. In prison, they want everyone to be uniform. We wear the same uniform. We have their individuality.
I'm on the left. That's not how it goes. We have the salad bowl of it used to be everybody wanted the melting pot, and that's really the right. You're going to sit there and you're going to be as white as possible. You're going to choose white names. You're going to wear white clothes. You're going to do your hair the white way. You're not going to allow for natural hairstyles, blah, 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 blah. Then you have the left that's like, girl, grow your hair natural. You don't need to be putting that lye in your hair. We have eat those food. Name your kids whatever the hell you want. That's the left. That's the left that I live in.
Okay, but here's the thing. Now, where is it? And this is where it's different. I would say, okay, for example, being united, everyone united under the United States Constitution, law-abiding, everything. But then you bring your own religious, political, philosophical views into life. And as long as you're not violating that Constitution or breaking the law, everyone can get along. But here's the problem. I truly believe, and when people start pushing that agenda, they want everybody to be uniform in certain things. That's where the problem comes. But let's just say, for example, we can take Nazi Germany, since you brought up Germany. They had
that's because it's my background.
Okay, no, but you know that the majority of the white American ethnic group is German, by the way. But anyway, for example, in Germany, Hitler rallied around the national thing, but he made it became uniform. If you did not have the right views and did the right behavior, then you were excluded. And of course, the Jews were the number one pick. But what about all homosexuals, all the liberals, everybody. He targeted everybody that wasn't with his.
And
But see,
let me bring up reparations in that case. We had Israel.
Wait. Look, I was quiet when you talked about the NFL, which is an argument between millionaires, billionaires, and more billionaires, because you forgot about the media. See, the TV networks leaned a whole lot on those negotiations because they were losing money too. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the media already had contracts with the NFL and they were going to pay whether the NFL had games or not. So they're the third business partner. It's not just the players and the owners. The media conglomerates have a big say in that too. Now, as far as going back to Nazi Germany, listen, man, Hitler was pimping. Hitler was pimping from the word go. Hitler was not Aryan. Hitler was not Aryan. He was not blonde-haired. He was not blue-eyed. He was not 6 feet tall. What he saw was a people that were hungry and desperate because they had been pretty much castrated after the First World War. So what Hitler saw was a demographic that was ripe for manipulation. So he started preaching this nationalist garbage that he knew the people wanted to hear. So he was serving chow to them, and they got in line behind him. And they said, I don't know about where this little blonde-haired fucker came from. I mean, brown-haired fucker came from. But I like what he's saying. Because he's telling me how great I am. He's telling me that I'm the master race, even though he's not part of my race. He's not Aryan, and he's saying we're great. So I like him a lot. And that was what happened in Nazi Germany. You know, that's what was happening. Hitler just saw a path to power and took advantage of it. And we could go on about, was the time right for Hitler or was Hitler right for the time? And that'd go on. It's like a snake eating itself. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but that's an example of all the guys. It's no different from Castro. Castro came preaching, talking about he was going to do better for him, and he was worse than the guy he replaced.
Of course.
But he told people what he wanted to hear.
History is full of desperate people clinging to someone. The Who made a song about it. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. I mean, come on.
Right.
You know?
But when it's all said and done, how do we apply this to the current situation?
Moderation. It's about moderation. That's what it's about. It's about people
and education and integration. You're correct, Barry.
But it's about people of different opinions. It's about people of different opinions finding somewhere to meet in the middle that benefits the most people. That's what it's about. And if you're a leader of nations or a leader of a group, that's your responsibility. Your responsibility is to find out how to make things better. That's what your responsibility is.
Everything we're saying is the same thing that Barack Obama was preaching, and I didn't see any progress.
Well, that's because, hold on. Well, I'll tell you something. But listen, I'll tell you something. If our system was not screwed up to the point where a Republican House can stymie and roadblock a Democratic president and vice versa, if when a Republican is voted in, the whole party moves into all the places and they get to do their Republican thing for 4 years, and we get to see the Republican thing and say, well, we like it or we don't, then that's one thing. But when you have a minority, a political minority, and they can't get anything done, then whose fault is it? I'll tell you whose fault it is. It's our fault because we're the ones that are sitting here letting the political system piss on us. Exactly. When you have a Republican House and a Republican Senate and they say, to the Democratic president, and then they turn around and say, look at you didn't get anything done. But the right pronoun is we didn't get anything done because all them motherfuckers on Capitol Hill are charged with the responsibility of taking care of their people too. But they don't because they get so caught up wanting to fuck the Democrats and let's make Obama look bad. Look, Trump has been in office how long? And every goddamn press conference he has, he talks about Obama. Well, how is he going to lead our country forward when he keeps looking backwards talking about Obama 6 years ago? How is he going to take us anywhere? Eyes forward. That's how we move.
But that's the same thing with the House.
Sorry, looks like I talked up all the time. Time for Michelle to take us out of here.
We still got
All right.
Oh,
So if you like, I got to do the wrap up. So
right.
if you
Wrap
like
us up.
this, if you found it interesting, please like, subscribe, and share. Also, please remember that our contact information is in about section. So if you want to reach out to us, that would be great. We could answer any questions. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, leave them in the comment section. And last but not least, if you're having any issues with the Department of Corrections that could be rectified through the grievance process, or they're violating the statute, you give us a heads up. We can help you with those grievances. We can help you with that process to rectify any problems that you're having with Chapter 33 being implemented correctly.
All righty.
That was great.
That was fantastic.
Great to have you back, Reese.
I liked it a lot.
Yes, that was great.
See y'all later.
See y'all later.
All right.
All right.